Welcome back, beauties, to Aesthetic Chat with Kiki. Again, I'm your host, Kiana Gamble, and I'm so excited to announce this next guest. She does training all over the country. She has her own training that she trains people at her house, as well as she's virtually training people through her Patreon. So this is Julie Bass Kaplan, and I hope you enjoy this episode. I'm so happy that we were able to make this work.
Me too. Thank you so much for asking.
Yeah. And I want you to kind of start out by telling your story, your journey into the aesthetic industry.
Oh, great. So my journey really started with just a vision of hair removal. It was 1999. And back in the day, everybody was afraid of laser. You know, it was brand new. Everybody kind of thought of it kind of a scary Austin Powers type of a thing. But honestly, I wanted something to do with my new husband as we were going to start a family. And I just thought life in the OR wouldn't be that great if we were going to have tiny children. So we bought a hair removal laser and got married and got pregnant and all the things in 1999, started a business. And basically I discovered lasers because I was really tired of all these hairs on my chin. And I look like a billy goat pretty much if I didn't pluck. So I always joke that I literally started my business by the hair of my chinny chin chin. So I know. And then from there, it just sort of grew. We decided to buy a VersaPulse laser to remove tattoos and learned how to do that, learned how to do brown spots with it. And then, pretty soon 2002 happened and Botox came out. And my husband is my medical director, and he had already been putting it into people's voice boxes for years because he's an ENT facial plastic. He kind of told me that it's being used for wrinkles way before it came out and was approved. So I was happy to learn that early on. And then, just kept evolving year after year after year. So I sort of came into it by accident, but I don't know. I just had the opportunity to learn things one at a time, which I thought was really a blessing.
How cool. You started doing lasers before you even started really any injectable procedures. So your background prior to the aesthetic industry was in the OR?
Yeah. So I was working my way through nursing school. I didn't even mention that, did I? I was working my way through nursing school as a scrub tech in the OR. So I was handing instruments in surgery. I did that for 10 years as I took my prereqs and entered the nursing program. In fact, I was scheduled to graduate with my RN, my ADN degree in 2000, but I accidentally got pregnant a month too early with my baby. And so I ended up not graduating until 2001. So I was running my business. I had to hire a friend who already had her RN, and I was basically kind of the director and teaching her, stuff. And I was being taught at the same time by my husband. So it was a really, really tough start for a business, not even able to do the procedures in the beginning. I just had a dream to have an independent business where I helped free people of their facial hair and body hair that they didn't want and their tattoos. But I couldn't even do it for, 2 years because I was literally still in nursing school. It was a pretty scary time financially because we didn't really know what we were doing. And I had to have an employee right off the bat, and everybody was afraid of lasers. So we literally lost money, I'd say, for the first 5 years. We just kept at it, just kept plugging along until we finally, after, I think it was year 5, when we finally made a profit.
Oh, wow.
I know.
That's so cool, though, that your entrance into everything was lasers. So when did you go back and get your nurse practitioner degree?
I didn't graduate with that until 2019. Just kept plugging along the whole time. So basically 2001, I got my ADN. And I just sort of grew the business until 2012. I realized in 2010 that I needed to advance my career because I wanted to teach. So in 2012, I graduated with my BSN. 2014 with my MSN. I got a master's in nurse leadership. And then after that, it just sort of set a fire in me. And I was like, I need to get my NP. And heck, maybe someday I'll get my DNP. But it's been a real slow, steady educational path. Definitely not lightning fast by any means. I definitely took my time.
Did you feel like, because you had mentioned, you want to teach, did you feel like there were too many barriers there being just an RN and trying to, advance within the field and teach others?
Absolutely. The barriers are real. And I feel like to get any sort of respect, to be able to lecture on podium, I would need to have a higher degree. To do nursing research and all of that. I knew I had to keep going. And in addition, when I suffered a facial injury from injectables, that was sort of a turning point for me. I thought if I don't keep trying to get more education and to do better, then I'm just going to go back to the OR. I was at that crossroads when my face was injured. So that really sprung me forward to get going. In fact, I started school the year that injury happened.
Julie, if you don't mind, we would love to hear you expand upon the vascular occlusion event that you experienced yourself.
Absolutely. It was 2010. It was February 11th of 2010. A nurse injector with 11 years experience at that time, just like me. She had also started in 1999. She came to my office to teach me how to do calcium hydroxyl apatite on the cheeks with her technique. And I'd already been using it for a few years. Since it came out really. But I always like to have people come to my office and train me. So she came to my office. I'd met her for the first time. She did my left cheek. And I noticed in one of the injection points in the mid cheek, I noticed that afterward, when I looked in the mirror, it was all blanched white. And that was my first clue that something was wrong. But unfortunately, back then we didn't know what we know now. We really didn't know how to recognize the signs and symptoms of a vascular occlusion. And to make it even worse, we were mixing calcium hydroxyl apatite with lidocaine with epinephrine. So immediately, when the substance got into my infraorbital artery, immediately the blanching happened, but it just kind of kept getting worse. So we both went into denial when she said, oh, it's not an occlusion, it's just from the epinephrine. And so I let her do the other side of my face. And when we were all done, I walked down the hall to show my husband because I was really concerned at that point. It had started turning like a light blue color from the white.
Oh, no.
I know. And at that point, probably about 45 minutes had gone by. And he just kind of freaked out on me. He sat me down and he said, yes, you're right. You do have a vascular occlusion. We need to start our protocol. So even though we had a protocol, honestly, it was one of those things like I thought it was 1 in a million. I did not think it was ever going to happen to me. I'd never thought I'd ever see one. And like I said, we just didn't know what we know now. But I believe the interventions he did on me right away in the office probably helped me heal quicker and helped me heal without a lot of scarring.
Which calcium hydroxyl apatite is, for people who don't know, is radiesse, which that's actually non-reversible too.
Correct.
So, I mean, for another thing, I'm sure you were a little freaked out because it's not like it was, hyaluronic acid and you could just kind of flood the area. I mean, can you kind of walk through what you guys ended up doing?
Sure. So basically, because we didn't have really any way to reverse it, we just did measures to dilate my blood vessels and try to get oxygen to the tissues. So he ordered me, we didn't have hyperbaric oxygen in our town at that time either. We do now, but back then we did not. So he basically ordered me some nasal cannula oxygen. He made me keep heat, and we did a bunch of heat and massage. I chewed a bunch, like 325 aspirin, and we just really focused on just anything we could do to vasodilate. I believe I even breathed in a paper bag and just did all those things. We ordered nitro paste, and I applied that evening of, because we didn't have any nitro paste in our office at the time. And that honestly was the worst of everything for me, because the second I put the nitro paste on my skin in the injury area, it felt like somebody lit my face on fire. So it was like a big blowtorch. No. Yeah, it was so incredibly painful. So I only did that once, and we stuck to basically watching it develop, and we just basically did wound care after that. We went to a wound care specialist, but we tried to reach out to people who had seen this, and we couldn't find anybody. And this is 2010. If you think about it, it wasn't that long ago, but nobody had ever seen one. We talked to so many people all across the United States. Everybody was saying, I think that's just a herpetic infection. I don't think that's really a vascular occlusion, because frankly, nobody seemed to have any experience with it at the time.
So did your skin actually break open then, like the integrity was broken and you actually had a true open wound from the occlusion?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, for several months.
Oh my gosh. So do you currently still use radiesse in your practice, or are you kind of steered clear from, things like that?
Believe it or not, I love it. I use it a lot in my practice, but I use it basically mostly off face. And if I do use it in the face, I'm going to use it with a great big cannula, because I believe it's safer. And I'm going to use it in an area where there's no named vessels, such as perhaps superficially along the jawline, and the neck with a cannula, using hyperdilute. So we do actually go through quite a bit of radiesse in our practice, because it's such a good biostimulation agent. And our patients really love it. But do I put it in cheeks? No, I would never put it in cheeks or a dangerous area such as a temple, nose, anything like that. But yeah, believe it or not, it did take me several years to get the courage to pick up another vial of it. But now I'm glad we did, because it really is a good part of our practice.
Well, that is so scary. I think that it also helps you, though, kind of relate to the patient if that happens. I kind of want to segue into, have you ever had a vascular occlusion that you've had to deal with on a patient before?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. This is my 23rd year of business and my 21st year of injecting. And back in the day, we started out with, believe it or not, the collagen. We did Cosmoderm, Cosmoplast, that kind of thing. So I have been injecting since my nursing license in 2001. And in all of that time, I have seen 5 cases with my own hands where I put the filler or the Sculptra in a patient and seen the blanching or seen signs of a vascular occlusion. But all 5 of those patients did really well and did not show any adverse events at all, such as necrosis. So I think that the experience I went through helped me spot it really, really easily and quickly, and helped me be able to resolve it on the table. So in all 5 cases, I recognized it on the table and reversed it right away. So I think that's key. And I think that's a real critical thing for injectors, to be able to diagnose and treat at that same moment. And just to your point earlier of why did I keep getting my education, as a nurse practitioner or a PA or an MD, DO, we can all diagnose and treat right away. We don't have to stop and consult somebody, before the patient gets treated. So that's another advantage of continuing your education.
Right. But so my question for you is, what do you recommend for those people that haven't had a vascular occlusion, but then it happens, right? It's not like if, it's when. So what is your advice for someone that goes through that? And then I feel like I've heard that once you get a vascular occlusion, it kind of makes you stop. And for some people, that's the turning point of do they continue on into aesthetics, or do they, pick another area of nursing and they kind of leave aesthetics altogether?
Absolutely. The biggest thing, and the thing I can't stress enough, is be prepared and know by heart the steps of what to do, know what it looks like and what to look for, because I've helped manage probably thousands of these remotely with people and help them out. And I'm telling you, every single vascular occlusion is different, right? They all present differently. That no two seem to be alike. So definitely educate yourself on how to be prepared, how to have everything you need, including physical things plus the education. If you're not a nurse practitioner or a PA, definitely have a medical director who's also highly educated in it as well, so that you have that backup and support and you're not out there all by yourself flailing, right? Mm-hmm. A lot of people will text me or message me and say, my medical director thinks this is normal. What do you think? And I'll look at it and just my heart will leap to my throat, like, oh my God, this is not normal. And it's too bad that their medical director that doesn't have the education. That I see that so many times and it breaks my heart. So if you are an RN, or whatever level is legal in your state, but you still cannot diagnose and treat, definitely align yourself with somebody who has your back, who has education, because it's just not okay for people. I feel so bad for people that get a hold of me and they don't have that support from their medical director.
For sure. I think it would be really scary not to have anyone in your back pocket to, refer to or be there with you to kind of hold your hand through it.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely education. Definitely have a team. We run drills in our office, and I think that's a really good idea, because even especially the person that answers the phone, needs to be educated on what the signs are. Because if somebody calls and say, yeah, so my lips were done 2 days ago and it just doesn't feel right and it looks very, very modeled, and what should I do? In that case, I would say they need to definitely, let one of us know, instead of just saying, oh, that's just bruising, it's fine. So even people on the front desk need to be involved in the drills. Everybody, the office manager, the medical director, the whole team. So I think that's a really smart thing to do.
I love that you're doing drills. I mean, it's an emergency, and I mean, you do that in the hospital where you run drills. So I think that's actually really smart and something that all practices should implement.
Yeah, and you could even have, name badges or lanyards, and with their role on the lanyards, like what's their role if there's vision impairment, right?
Yeah.
And having the emergency phone numbers for a retinal specialist on your box, on your emergency kit, is a good idea as well. But mainly just the drills are great because nobody should be grabbing the protocol off the shelf to read what to do when it happens. They need to just kick in gear and know it by heart, just like ALS.
I love that advice. So I do kind of want to segue into, with there being so many different options and ways to get into aesthetics, you started with lasers, there's Sculptra, there are threads, there's filler, there's Botox. There's so many things that are within aesthetics. That where do you recommend someone starting out start?
So I always say, if somebody reaches out to me and says, hey, I want to get into it, but I don't know where to start, I always say that I think the best training, you can go to courses, you can go to conferences, you can go to private trainings, but the best training is the day-to-day hands-on with an expert. So wherever you live, I highly recommend you go get Botox or threads or filler or laser from the best place in town. Get to know them, establish a relationship, and just keep saying, I really want to work here. I really want to work here. What will it do? What would you need for me to apply here? And I think that's the best way, because then they know you know them, and you already have a relationship. So I tend to hire patients a lot, and I think it usually works out beautifully. And so the thing is that you can train with the best people for a weekend, but it's not going to get you what you'll get day-to-day hands-on with somebody really, really good.
That's actually really great advice. And do you recommend people start with, maybe just neuromodulator and then go from there, or maybe starting out with laser and just picking one modality and becoming really great at that before moving on or adding to your toolbox?
Yeah, I really do. I think, when I train somebody in my office, I like to do the cumulative training method. So we'll start them off with perhaps laser hair removal, get them like good with their hands, get them comfortable talking to patients, and then maybe graduate to something such as, Botox, and then get them really good with a needle. And again, that patient consultation and handling different patients' personalities, that kind of thing. And then, moving on one thing after another, one laser after another. So getting really good at one thing and then advancing to the next.
That's great advice. So I want to ask you, how did you kind of make that transition into the education realm of things? Working with the different drug manufacturers and getting on podium at places and doing kind of those things. Do you feel like were they coming to you and saying, you have all this like knowledge, education, like, can you train others? Or were you kind of seeking them out to share your expertise?
In the beginning, I nobody knew me, right? I live in a small town in Northern California with 90,000 people. So like nobody knew me. I just knew that I had this message that I needed to get out there. I wanted people to be aware of vascular occlusions and how to prevent them and how to treat them and recognize them, the diagnose and treat piece. Mm-hmm. So I had this burning desire to get that out there to the world because nobody was talking about it, like literally nobody. And like I said, at that crossroads, I was either going to go back to the OR and quit, or I was going to drive forward. So I decided to get back in school, drive forward. And the first thing I did while I was in school is I sort of got out of I'm very, very shy by nature. So I got out of my shyness and I applied, I wrote to ISPAN, which back then was ASPSN, but I wrote to ISPAN, is a plastic surgical nurses conference group, and I applied to speak at one of their conferences in Montreal, Canada. And, I was at school at the time, so I wrote a paper and I wrote a talk, and I got up there and spoke for the first time. My abstract was accepted, thank goodness. And I flew all the way to Montreal, Canada, and I was so nervous when I got up on podium for the first time. But I met the most amazing people there, Tracy Hada, MK Maloney, and I just looked out there and I thought, you know what? I'm surrounded by peers. I don't know these people, but they have my heart and I have theirs. And that was such a powerful meeting, and it was such a powerful thing that it really lit my fire to do it more. But I was so nervous. I was shaking. My mouth was dry. I could barely get a word out, and I just thought I was going to faint, but I did it. And from that moment on, I started writing papers and publishing them in their ISPAN's journal. And I just got this desire just to keep going. And shortly after, Allergan asked me to be a trainer, and I was going into offices, just little offices around Northern California. And it just grew from there, really gradually. I'd say and that was 2012 when Allergan hired me. So really my education career started off after my injury in 2010, and definitely just started climbing after 2012, after that first time on podium. So
how amazing.
Yeah. And if you ever want to get on podium, just write an abstract and just ask to be there. So people aren't going to ask you, you're going to have to ask them in the beginning. You're going to have to open that door. And if you don't open that door, it'll just stay shut. So go for it.
That's really, really good advice. I do have to ask, since you are more shy, do you still get nervous to get on podium now? Or is it something that's more natural and organic for you?
No, the first 5 minutes, I'm so nervous. I've recently fallen off the stage twice. So now I'm nervous of going up. So now I'm nervous just stepping up like 2.5 feet, off the ground. And, but no, I'm still shy. I'm still nervous. I have this imposter syndrome where I get up there. I'm like, why have I been asked to be here? Like, I don't deserve to be here. There's so many more people that deserve to be here. Why am I here? And I run that through my mind as this terrible negative talk track that I have to just conquer and move it aside. I have to sit there and go, hey, stop it. You've been injecting for 21 years. You got this. You deserve to be up here. And it's crazy, but there I am, So then I notice after about 5 minutes, I'm normal again. I pretend I'm talking to friends, and I literally don't know what's going to fly out of my mouth because I start getting like very natural, like talking like I would talk to my friends. So that makes me nervous too, that I don't know what's going to come out of my mouth because I'll just start joking and I don't know where my jokes are going to lead, but it makes me feel comfortable. In addition, oh my gosh, I do suffer with dyslexia. So I can't read out loud. So there's my, slides ahead of me, and I can't just sit there and read my slides. I have to have the slides remind me of what I'm supposed to talk about. And literally every time I speak, it's off the top of my head because I can't read out loud.
Oh my goodness. Well, we are our own worst critics for sure. But I can say that you're being on podium at LAMCA, it was great. Like, I did feel like, you were talking to the crowd, which is nicer than, reading the slides. So I will have to say you did great.
Oh, thank you. I was so nervous about that one in particular because think about it. Like what Dr. Karimi has done is sticking all these really amazing MDs up there with NPs and RNs and PAs, like putting us all together. Like we all have a seat at the table. That is so incredible and so powerful. And I thought, oh my God, Julie, don't mess it up. Don't mess it up. And then I've never been there before. That was the first time I ever spoke there. So I didn't know, that where the timer was. I didn't know how to pronounce some people's names. And I was so nervous, but everybody, you guys all made me feel at home. And I thank you for that. And, I probably set up inappropriate things all day long, but but I am a truck driver's daughter. That's just where I go in default. But it's, it's from my heart for sure.
I loved the multi-specialty approach there. I love that there were so many different specialties to talk. And yeah, they did have, RNs, NPs, PAs. They had all different types of people on podium, whereas what I'm hearing is, it's not necessarily the case for other conferences or other spaces to allow, nurses, nurse practitioners to even speak
right
on aesthetics, which is crazy because RNs are injecting more than MDs are in some cases and in some areas,
Yeah, I think we do about Leslie Fletcher says we're close to 90% of all injectables done. So, to me, I don't go to conferences that don't allow RNs or PAs or NPs up on the podium because I don't want to support somebody who's not supporting us. I think it's terrible. And it just it just feels like we're going back in time to, suffragette times where it's just not okay. So yeah, I don't go to those at all. And I don't want to give them any money until they start respecting us.
90%.
That's what Leslie Fletcher is. I think
that is crazy.
I know. And believe me, the pharmaceutical companies know who's injecting their products. People who outwardly shame us for what we're doing and talk down to us, believe it or not, you look them up and they have NP and PA and RN injectors in their office too. So it's like, it's not okay to use us and abuse us.
Right. I mean, people that are working for those physicians too, it's like, I wonder how they're treated day to day and in clinic,
Yeah, I shudder to think, which brings me back to the first point. If you are an RN and you want to be an injector, choose a wonderful office that has a really good climate. And you can tell when you walk in an office what kind of culture's there. But if the nurses are happy, everybody's being respected, you can feel it.
Very true. So I do kind of want to transition into the creation of your Patreon and all the videos you create each week, as well as, your head and breakfast that you host at your house.
Yeah, I know. It's a pretty original idea, right?
It's very cool.
I love it so much. It's honestly the best part of our month, welcoming people. But yeah, it all started, believe it or not, with the people at home doing do-it-yourself injectables. I realized when there was a YouTube person showing people how to order stuff online and inject in their bathrooms. And when I saw that happen, I kind of got vocal about it and challenged her, turned her into the FDA, and all these things have transpired. And what I realized is that movement was much bigger than I ever dreamed. At the same time, there was somebody in my town of Reading pretending to be a nurse and injecting silicone into people, and that she ordered online. Yeah. So I was seeing all these disasters in my own town and seeing this lady show people how to order imitation fillers and neuromodulators. So I kind of made a stand about it and realized how big it was, how big of an issue it was. And then I was thinking, oh my God, I'm showing people how to do this on my Instagram. Like I'm literally doing a how-to on my Instagram. And the YouTuber, actually, I was talking to her. We did this show on the doctor's TV show. And I was talking to her, asking her not to teach people this anymore. And she goes, well, what are you doing? And she goes, you're teaching people all the time on your Instagram. And it was just a like, oh my God moment. And I just said, oh, you're right. I can't do this anymore. And she goes, why don't you just get a Patreon? And I didn't even know what that was. And I said, well, what is that? And she goes, it's a way you can vet who subscribes to you and you can do your own thing. And I was just like, oh my God. And I looked at it and I thought, this is the answer. So I immediately took all of my videos off of YouTube, off of Instagram, off of any social media that I could find. And I started a Patreon, and that was in November of 2019, right before the pandemic. So but it kind of was cool because it gave me something to do during the pandemic when we couldn't see our real patients. My poor husband, I was injecting him like crazy. I think I threw like 20 syringes of Illuma in his face.
Oh, no. Our poor families.
Yeah, I know. And I was like, I gotta teach. Let me do this. And so I started growing the Patreon, and it's been such a blessing. And then when we finally moved to Ashland, Oregon, we built this really like our dream house. And then we had this vacation home. And I said, honey, what do you think of this idea? What we have potentially a place for 10 to 12 people to sleep between the two houses. What if we invite people in? We show injection anatomy with cadavers, because I did that through Palette Resources. And I said, and let's just let them inject them and then find out where their filler goes from our own home. And, and he said, oh my God, let's do it. So it was really nice. And so we kicked off 10 months ago, or almost a year ago now, kicked it off with some friends. We had them fly here and we did a trial run. And then I did 2 more trial runs with my office ladies. And then we launched it, and it's been such a blessing. So 10 to 12 people sleep in our houses, and we cook them breakfast, we cook them lunch, we all go out to dinner, and in between we inject the cadaver heads and ourselves, and then go down and find out exactly where our filler went. And it's just 2.5 days of community, friendships, new friendships being forged. And it's just a beautiful thing.
Very cool. The part about, people injecting themselves, like I was more concerned about, people that take one class and then they try to go inject filler on their friends. That's a whole other layer of, injecting yourself from a YouTube video. That's very concerning.
Believe me, it's an underbelly. It's happening a lot. And people do reach out to me and say, oh my God, I did this to myself. Now what do I do? And I'll usually hook them up with somebody that's nearby that I trust. But It happens so much. They're really hurting themselves out there, and it does break my heart. But I feel like I don't want to be a part of the problem anymore. So that's why I don't do step by step, here's how I do it, just out there anymore. So with Patreon, they send their license number to me and I can look them up and make sure they're legit. And if I find somebody in there that isn't, I can block them. So
well, that's good.
Yeah, it just makes me feel a little bit better about putting my videos out there and teaching digitally.
So was there a bunch of clearance to getting cadavers to your house?
Yes.
I cannot even imagine. Like, I was like, wait, when I found it, I was like, this is happening at her house? Like, what kind of, I don't know how you even get cadavers to your home.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. It took several months. They vetted us. We have 2 businesses lined up. We have 2 addresses with the businesses. So yeah, I had to establish a, legit business. My husband is the medical director and he's there with me, and we have to be sure it's in a secure, locked facility with an alarm and all the things. Yeah. So they vetted us very, 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 very carefully. And I think that's necessary. It needs to happen.
Well, that's amazing. Are there any last words that you have for, aspiring injectors, new injectors, kind of really for any injectors that you kind of haven't given yet? I mean, you've given some great advice. So,
oh, thank you. I guess in closing, I would say reach for your dreams. If your dream is to be an injector and make people happy, I think it's the most amazing thing, most amazing career. But don't worry. Don't say, oh, I'm just an associate degree nurse. Don't say that. Don't say I'm just a this or just a that. Just say, hey, I'm going to reach for my dreams, and I don't care if it takes 20 years. I'm going to do it. And honestly, if you can submerge yourself full time into an office, get training every single day, and the more you do, the better you're going to be. Don't just say, hey, I want to do it once a week as a side gig while I work in the ICU. Just immerse yourself, go for it, jump in, and never quit.
Great advice. So tell everyone where they can find you on social, as well as find more information on Patreon and, your head and breakfast.
Okay, so I'm jubilant.julie on Instagram, and in my bio, you'll see a link for my Patreon. It's basically go to patreon.com and search for Jubilant Julie. And then all the information for the head and breakfast is there, because I only do the head and breakfast for Patreon members. And again, that's to kind of keep us together as a community and vet everybody who comes to my house. So yeah, it is just a beautiful thing. And hopefully the Patreon only costs $9 a month for beginners. And there's different tiers, but hopefully somebody out there will go, oh my gosh, I can afford that. And they'll get a lot of education before they even pick up their first syringe. That's my hope.
Well, thank you, Julie, for coming on. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me. I had a great time.
Thank you again, Julie, for taking the time to come on the podcast. I loved how our conversation talked about a whole broad spectrum of things. We even discussed a little bit about radiesse as well as vascular occlusions, and it was very fun chatting with you. And that was season 2, episode 2. Stay tuned because I have a lot of other fun guests coming up this season. So as you guys know, you can find updates on the podcast Instagram, which is at aesthetic.chatwithkiki. You can follow along on my aesthetic journey, which is at aestheticnurse.kiki. On the website, there is going to be some new apparel dropping, so that is aestheticnursekiki.com. And for aspiring injectors in the Pacific Northwest, I am having my first event called Brunch and Aesthetic Chat, September 23rd. So if you haven't already heard about the event, go ahead and check it out on my website under the events tab. It's called Brunch and Aesthetic Chat. So I'm really excited to see you all at the event. I have some really fun speakers coming up, and I'm going to do my first live podcast with Melissa Berg. So I'm really, really excited for that. And if you haven't already heard about Love Pro Lash, You need to go check them out. They're at-home lash extensions. They last up to 10 days. I've heard of people getting them to last even longer, but they take less than 5 minutes to apply, the same great quality as well as look that true lash extensions give you. So they did give me a code. Use Kiana10 at checkout for 10% off. All right, beauties, have a great day. Bye.